Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the CFIB webinar on credit card surcharging and trying to answer some very practical, from a practical perspective, whether this makes sense for your business. My name is Laura Jones. I'm the Executive Vice President of CFIB, which is, I always say, really just a fancy way of saying I wear a lot of different hats. And like you business owners out there, I am kind of doing whatever's needed to get things done. And I am really happy to be joined today by some very capable colleagues. And for those of you who are regulars on our webinar, you will recognize some of these faces. And for those of you who are new, welcome. I should say that today we have opened up our webinar. Typically, these are for our members of CFIB. Today we have business owners. We've opened it up to all small business owners. We do that occasionally. So if you're not a CFIB member, welcome to you. And if you are a CFIB member and you're a regular, welcome to you, or if you're new to the webinars. Corinne Pullman is our Senior Vice President of National Affairs and Partnerships. So Corinne will pop on her video and say hi. She's really our expert in all things to do with Ottawa and also our savings programs, and has been very, very involved in credit card issues over a long period of time. So there was a great question that we got before the webinar started, like, where did all this come? Like, why are we all of a sudden, I think it was Eric who was saying, like, why now? Why is this a thing right now? I think was the exact word. So Corinne can give you the background on why this is a thing right now. And it's been a thing for a while, because for most business owners, credit cards are and their fees associated with them are a bit of a thorn in the side. And so we've got a long history on this. Rachel is also with us, and Rachel is very involved in our tools and things that we put together for members. For those of you who joined us during the COVID series will know Rachel well. She was really rolled up her sleeves with CRA and was participating in a lot of our webinars. And also new to our webinars here is Marquesi. Marquesi's joining us, and she's one of our business advisors who, which means she's on the phone. And Jocelyn is also with us. So they are joining for the webinar and will help answer questions. So you can pop up on the screen there. Great. And so what I'd love to know now is we've got a chat function and a Q&A. So I'm just going to a couple of things. If you have questions for the presenters, please put that in the Q&A, and that's easier for us to find. But we'll leave the chat function open because it's often fun to just talk to each other or to have just, comments. So you can put that in the chat function below. I believe we've already put the presentation in the chat function, so it is there. I see some people are already saying hi in terms of where they're from. Please let us know where you're from. I always love to see. Okay, here we go. So Ontario, we've got a lot of Ontario folks. Canyon, BC, Hamilton, Ontario. So fantastic. No, I'm seeing Newfoundland there. Alberta's in the house. Awesome. Toronto, of course, is in the house. Winnipeg, Stonewall, tons of folks joining us. It's always fantastic to see just how many great business owners there are from coast to coast, and so fun to have you all with us on these webinars. So again, thank you for joining us, and we're going to get straight to the content now, because I want to get to as many of your questions as possible. Oh, we always like to do a little humor too, for those of you. This isn't directly related to the credit cards, but it's the same idea. And so another challenge we hear from business owners, of course, is the showroom shopping. So I laughed out loud when I saw this. We always think it's kind of nice before we get into the serious content to give everyone a bit of a giggle. Okay, so today's agenda, we are talking about surcharging, but as Corinne and I often did during COVID, if there were any other updates that we felt were important for you to hear, we cover those off as well. And there's some news on the CEBA loans, and we just know with, I think it was 900,000 business owners across Canada took on CEBA loans. With that number of business owners having CEBA loans, this is something we felt we just wanted to give you a quick update on. And related to the topic today on surcharging is the credit card class action settlement. So we're just going to cover that off. And then Corinne's going to answer Eric's question, which is, why are credit credit cards a thing right now and give a little bit of background on our work on credit cards. And then we'll get straight into the surcharging. If you have questions for us, feel free to put them in the Q&A as we go along, and we will get to as many of those as we can throughout the presentation. And I believe this is the point where I get to turn it over to my very capable colleague, Corinne. And
oh, you just went on mute, Laura.
oh, sorry, I'll pop up again. Sorry, I was turning it over to you super fast. So turning it over to you, and then I'll pop up again with questions, as will Rachel. So over to you, Corinne.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Lots to get through today. So we'll just jump right in. As Laura said, we wanted to make sure you got the latest updates on a couple other things that were occurring. First of all, is a CAD and emergency business accounts loan. Those were the $40,000 loans that were provided at the beginning of COVID that was extended to $60,000, a portion of which is forgivable. Wanted to let you know that notices were sent to all CEBA recipients within the last 2 weeks. You may have received a notice from your financial institution about the fact that the deadline has been extended to pay it back to the end of 2023, which is great news. Everybody has a little extra time. The original timeline was the end of this year. Now it's to the end of 23 in order to pay it back to still get the forgivable portion of the loan. So if you have a $40,000 loan, you would get $10,000 forgivable if you have it paid back by the end of next year. And if you have a $60,000 loan and you pay it back, you get $20,000 of that forgivable. Now, if you're not able to pay by the end of next year, by the end of 23, and you're considered to be in good standing, you will be able to have that loan converted to a 2-year term loan, and interest will start to be applied at 5%. And you will not be able to access the forgivable portion of the loan. You'll have to pay back the entire loan. So there is an incentive to try it pay back by the end of next year, but there is a bit of a cushion for you if you can't. However, this is the bad news part of it. Thousands of businesses, we're estimating somewhere around 5%. So we think that's around 50,000 businesses have actually been told that they're ineligible in the notifications that they received from their financial institution. And what that means is that essentially they're being told that they will be able to pay back the loan by the end of next year with 0% interest, but they will not get the forgivable portion of the loan. So they do have a little extra time to pay it back, but they do not get the forgivable portion of the loan. There is a lot of folks out there in that category, so we want to make sure that anybody who's in that category has some information. If we go to the next slide, if you find yourself in that category of folks who has been determined to be ineligible, you can call the CEBA call center. We have the number there on the screen to find out why you were ineligible. There is an important caveat here. The decisions unfortunately are final, and there's no appeal process in place for anybody who's in that category. What we're trying to do is trying to get a political sort of intervention to help those that legitimately applied for these loans, but for some reason are now found ineligible because maybe they were just under the threshold to get the loan in terms of the payroll, or there was some slight mistake in the application, but everything else is actually correct. Anything, there's a number of them in that category. So we are going to try to continue to push government to do something to help those who legitimately should be getting the loan. So we need you to share your story if you're in that category, sign our petition, call your MP. These are things that we're asking those businesses that have been deemed ineligible, who feel that they should be eligible, should do right now if they're in that particular caveat. So we'll continue to lobby government to give another opportunity for those businesses to prove that they have qualifications for it, and really push them to provide that forgivable portion to all of those who applied in good faith. Laura, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, Corinne, Jana is asking, she didn't get any notification about the CEBA loan from her bank, and I imagine others may be in the same category. Should she be worried about that, or should she be asking her bank? What advice do you have for people who haven't heard anything from their bank?
Yeah, so there could be a couple of things going on, and I'll let Rachel also answer this question, but the banks are still in the process, some of them, of sending out these notices. So she may not have gotten it yet because she's with a smaller institution, for example, or just hasn't gotten to her yet. They only started them about 2 weeks ago, and the process is going to take about 4 weeks in total. So that could be one reason. Secondly, she can call her financial institution and ask, what's the deal? Do I have until the end of 2023? Because everybody has until the end of 2023, but confirming that will be a good idea. Rachel, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess I've heard from some of our members that calling the financial institution hasn't really helped them find out whether they qualified for this extension or not. So what I would probably recommend is, again, to call that CEBA call center to find out if that should be extended to you or not. And yeah, of course, checking with your financial institution doesn't hurt.
Mm-hmm. And, Sarah's also asking, Corinne, what reasons might be included if you weren't eligible, if they've now deemed you eligible? Like, what kinds of things are they looking at?
Well, there's, like I said earlier, they're looking at things like the original parameters to get the loan is they had to have between 20,000 and 1.5 million in payroll. Some people may have been just under 20,000, right? It might have been 19,000 or 18,000. And so they are considered not eligible. So that could be one reason. There may have been a mistake in the application and and the EDC or the government tried to work with, they say they tried to get a correction with you and they didn't respond or it didn't turn out or something else happened. So it could be a mistake somewhere along the way that could have not been resolved. Some of those folks that were deemed ineligible may have been asked to apply in a different format through what we call there was another stream that you could apply where you had to show how much expenses you had. And there too, it was a very complicated program and people got caught up in a lot of the paperwork around that. So there could be another reason there. Fraud is another reason that government suspects some of these may be fraudulent claims. So there's a number of different reasons that could be in there. Again, Rachel, I'm assuming you have something else you want to add.
Yeah, I think, and it's a popular question that comes up, like, why are people being considered ineligible now? A lot of what we understand is the later iterations of the programs and streams allowed the administrators to put on more ways to verify whether you were in fact eligible or not for this program. So you might only be getting this news now as opposed to when you first applied.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you get on with it, Corinne, because we want to get to the main point of the webinar, which is the credit card surcharging. But encourage anyone who has questions on this, keep putting them in the Q&A. We'll get to more of them maybe at the end, but also we've got Jocelyn and Mark Hesse answering some of the questions for you as we go. Back to you.
Thank you. So the only other thing on CEBA I wanted to mention is that we're continuing also to lobby more generally for everybody who has a CEBA loan to extend it yet another year to 2024, the deadline. So because we know that the debt loads for many of you are still fairly high from the pandemic. So we're trying to find ways for government to help small businesses deal with that debt. So one is to extend the deadline, and the second is to potentially even enlarge the amount that is forgivable to maybe even 50% of the loan that you have. So those are a couple of things that are ongoing. So sign the CEBA petition if you agree with some of these approaches we're taking, and that would certainly help us. If we move to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about the credit card class action settlement. This was, of course, this was a part of a credit card class action lawsuit, which we're going to talk about a bit more in a second, because it also resulted in the surcharging that we're going to be talking about. But the first component of this was the fact that there was a settlement between the banks and the credit card companies, and of course, a small business owner that was finally settled earlier, late last year. That settlement resulted in about 131 million to be redistributed to anybody who accepted payment for credit cards over the course of the last 20 years. The original deadline was September 30th. It had opened last June to try to get a piece of that settlement. They just announced that they're reopening it again to everybody until the end of December. So if you have not yet applied for the credit card class action settlement, and you have accepted credit cards anytime between approximately 2001 and 2020, you will be able to get some portion of this particular settlement. If you're considered a small merchant with your average annual revenue of under 5 million, you can get $30 per year for every year that you accepted credit cards, maximum of about $600. But if you're a medium, between $5 million and $20 million of revenue annually over the claim period, you can get a bit higher amount, up to $6,000, depending on the number of years that you accepted the credit cards. If you go to the next slide, it's just a quick overview of how you can claim. It's fairly straightforward. Those are the dates for which, if you were a merchant, it's between March 23rd, 2001 and September of 2021, accepted Visa or MasterCard and had discount fees. The place you go to is creditcardsettlement.ca. That is the place where you can submit your claim. It's a fairly straightforward information. All they're looking for a undocumented claim is your name, contact, the size of your business, and have you take an attestation that you actually did collect credit cards at some point since 2001. So you have until the end of December to do that. So if you haven't done it, we encourage you to think about it. All right, so on to the next slide. We're gonna jump in a little bit into some of our work on credit cards. This is something we've been working on for a very long time. It's been over a decade since we started really taking credit cards as one of our major files to look at, because we realized there was very little oversight of this industry in Canada. So we've been able to accomplish quite a bit. We've been able to convince Visa and MasterCard to lower fees. However, they're still not low enough. We've had a code of conduct created. We've been able to protect the Interact system in Canada, which is a much lower cost way of accepting payments from customers. And of course, we now have the option to surcharge on credit cards, which we'll get into details of how that will work in a minute. But there's still a lot of work to do. We are still pushing for further reductions in the costs of accepting credit cards. I mean, surcharging wouldn't even be on our radar or be that important if the actual fees to accept credit cards weren't so high. So we believe that's still a way we want to go to try to push the industry to continue to lower credit card costs. Also, there's a credit card code of conduct, which gives you, a merchant, a lot more power. We want to make sure it continues to be modernized and reflects the realities of today. And then things like chargeback policies are also important. So those are things that become more and more an issue for many of you who accept payment by credit card, of course, is that chargebacks can be very costly. And there's not a lot of understanding of how they work. We need more clarity and more balance between merchants and consumers when it comes to chargebacks. We're also looking, there is going to be probably some announcements. The government has promised multiple times in the last couple of years that they're going to do more work on lowering credit card fees, but they have not yet done it. So we're certainly going to try and continue to push them to keep that promise. And we're hopeful to see something either in the next month or so through the federal economic statement or in the next budget, which is usually in the spring. So our work will continue on that front, which leads us to the next slide, which is all about surcharging. So what is it? Here we are, Surcharging 101. It's basically just a fee that you add when a customer decides to pay by credit card. So why now? Well, that's a big question. Why is this all a big deal right now? Well, it goes back to that credit card class action lawsuit that I mentioned and the settlement. As part of that settlement, obviously Visa and MasterCard provided money towards the settlement, as did all the big banks. But Visa and MasterCard also agreed to allow surcharging 1 year after the settlement was completed. And that happened last year in October. The settlement was finally completed. So 1 year later was October 6, 2022. And as of that date, businesses have the option now to charge an additional fee at the point of sale if a customer pays by credit card. There are some caveats to this because there's a bunch of steps you have to take before you're allowed to surcharge in order to sort of register and let your processor know and all that. We also understand a lot of processors at this point are still not ready to do it, so may not be quite available yet, though legally you are allowed to at this point in time. The only place where there are other rules is Quebec. In Quebec, because of their consumer protection laws, the option to surcharge is actually not available to those Quebec-based merchants who will sell to consumers. If a merchant in Quebec is selling to other businesses, they can then have the option to surcharge. But if that merchant is selling to customers or consumers, they are not allowed to surcharge at this point in time. Our colleagues in Quebec are actually going to start lobbying the government in Quebec to do like all the other provincial governments across the country and eliminate that ban. But at this point in time, it's not allowed for those business to consumer types of transactions. Okay, we'll get into the nitty-gritty now of how this will work. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Rachel, who will then talk about some of the things that we'll be doing. Oh, no, sorry, it's you, Laura. I'm sorry, it is Laura.
I was like, wait.
What is you? Sorry. You're going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from members on
Any of us could do this, really, but yeah, no, I think that Corinne, you did a good job of working through the history of this, and I think it's fair to say that small business owners have been frustrated by what's going on with credit cards, and we've just put up a couple of comments that what we're hearing from business, of course, that these costs are significant, and that's always a challenge. But I think in times where there's labor shortages, supply chain challenges, inflation. This 2 to 3% off the bottom line is even more significant. Can feel even more significant in tough economic times. So this just kind of represents what we're hearing from business owners. So I'm going to go to the next slide and share with you some additional data. So this is hot. We don't have I noticed the other day that we didn't put the source on this, but just so everybody knows, this was from a survey that we did just a couple of weeks ago. So it's an October survey, and we had about 3,000 responses. And a lot of the polls you see, by the way, on television or whatever, they'll have like maybe hundreds of responses if you're lucky. So we get really great response rates. And so for members who fill in these surveys, thank you very much. As you know, we use these to give you a voice with politicians. But one thing we wanted to know was how many merchants are planning on surcharging. And so a lot of you are in the category where you're not sure yet. Others maybe do it if competitors will do it. And only about 18% are saying, yes, no matter what, we're going to do it. And then some in the no category. So this just gives you a little bit of context there. And I think there's some good reasons to be a bit cautious. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But of course, it's, these are fees that you are charged, that there's also good reasons to, want to make that more transparent and visible to your customers. So let's go to the next slide. And I think this is where Rachel comes in, and she's going to walk you through some things to consider. And then Corinne and I are going to pop up probably and provide a little bit more commentary on some of these as you go along, Rachel.
Thanks. And I'm trying to condense all of this into one slide, but we could probably talk about this for quite a while, right? We're still early in the surcharging game, and then we've already seen companies like TELUS get fried publicly for implementing surcharges, and others like TNT, who are celebrated by consumers for posting on social media that they're not implementing a surcharge. So here are some questions or considerations or what you really need to know or think about before you start surcharging. So first of all, is pretty clear what are the current costs to accept your credit cards for your business. Do you even accept them? I saw Sarah was saying that she didn't, but yeah, do you accept credit cards? What acquirers are you using, or processing companies are you using? I've heard from many members that they only really look at the bottom line because that's easier. But knowing if you purchased or rented terminals and how much you're paying is just so important. A few years ago, I even heard from a CFIB member who had 8 payment processor agreements layered on top of each other, and not even from the same acquirer, all because of a sketchy sales rep. I know these guys can be quite pushy, but knowing this cost will not just help you in this surcharging matter, but it'll also help you get some leverage or power in those conversations. The next thing is, how will you track the amounts you surcharge? Some acquirers are going to be ready and able to just have this be a little button or automatic number to process in your POS system. And others are going to ask you to track this in your cash register systems, for example. And knowing these amounts are going to be super crucial for you to know how it's going to impact your taxes, which is that next bullet point there. On the sales tax side, what we've seen businesses do so far is implement them before taxes, maybe add a line at the end to show how much that costs. And then on the business income tax side, I know many businesses deduct processor acquirer expenses as a business expense from their income, and know that surcharging is going to be considered income for your business. So make sure you're talking to your accountant to see if it fits with your tax plan. Another aspect to consider is consumer reaction. Will this change consumer perception of your business? Will it impact your sales? It's no surprise that customers don't like added fees. And at the end of the day, you know your clients best, and how much you decide you're going to surcharge them to that maximum of how much you pay to accept credit cards, or that cap of 2.4%. That'll really be up to you, and deciding which credit cards, which products, which brands you're going to surcharge. That will be your business decision. And lastly, while it's not really required in the rules, we strongly recommend that you think about how it's going to impact your customers on the notifications standpoint. Whether you decide to surcharge or not, there is so much publicly going on in the media about this. And it's an opportunity for all of us to educate consumers about the issues that currently exist with the credit card industry. At the end of the day, consumers don't know your business realities. So getting them to relate and understand why allowing businesses the option to surcharge is really important to help mitigate some of those misunderstandings. And even just last week, we heard from a member that they were getting 1-star ratings from customers for implementing a surcharge incorrectly. So really imperative, be clear about setting an expectation, giving an explanation about what you're doing, and be clear about educating your consumers on what options they have to avoid these surcharges. Let's move on to the next slide. So here we kind of talk about what is actually required when you decide to surcharge. So at least 30 days before surcharging, you're required to notify your credit card networks. So that's notifying MasterCard and Visa. Visa doesn't actually require anything, but thought we should highlight that. And then MasterCard does have this online disclosure form for you to share with them that you want to surcharge. The second item there is notify your acquirer processor. Just know that not all acquirers or processors are quite ready for this. And not all of them, like I mentioned before, are going to be ready to just have this in your POS system. So you might have to find an alternative, like tracking it through your cash register. And that third bullet point, which I can't stop recommending enough, is notify your clients about it, educate them. We actually at CFIB have created a few documents to help you. I think they'll be posted on our website shortly, but a template for an email template to send to your customers to give them a heads up that this is something they'll start to see on their invoices. Some FAQs to help you answer some of your common questions that you might get. These are all resources that we're trying to help you with as well. So let's move on to the next slide. So when you actually, 30 days later, when you actually get the okay to surcharge, you won't actually need any confirmation or anything. It's just a matter of having it be 30 days later. You'll have to ensure that you're disclosing the fact that you're surcharging in your business. So what does that look like? Posting a poster at the entrance of your business that shows that you're surcharging. And this can also be on your website. Also posting a sign that shows that you are surcharging and the amount right at the point of sale. And then making sure that the itemized amount is clearly itemized on the receipt or invoice. So those are 3 things that through the surcharging rules you are required to do. We at CFIB, again, try to help you as much as we can. So what we've done is we've created a poster. We actually have 2 posters, one for your entrance and one for at your point of sale, and really to help you ensure that you're meeting that responsibility. And we've even gone so far as to create a website to educate business consumers about these changes in Canada to try to help you answer some of those questions. So let's take a look at that on the next slide. Oh, hi, Laura. Did you want to?
Yeah, before you move to the next slide, just want to make sure that everybody, if you go back one slide, that this resource is available for you to post on your, and so there's a link there, but it is actually, you're going to take them to, I think, the site where if the consumers want more information, they can scan that code, and that's where you're going now. I just don't know that people would have caught that. So I want, this gives consumers more information. And one of the things we hear from members is they like sometimes this kind of signage, that it's coming from CFIB, an organization representing a lot of businesses. So it's not just them doing it, it's part of and it almost is like any kind of, just sort of makes it a little bit more like lots of people are doing it. It's not just my business. It makes it look a little more official. So I will let you continue and show what we have on our website.
No problem. Yeah, so this is a quick peek into the consumer surcharging site. So when they scan that QR code, which we kind of hope will reduce that waiting time to get to that cash register maybe, and they can just pull it up on their phone, and then they can see kind of what the changes for surcharging have happened in Canada, at least. We've even included a few some fun facts that you might be able to use when you're talking to them. If we go on to the next slide, we can see them a little bit closer. But things like 78% of Canadians own credit cards linked to rewards, most of which carry a higher cost for merchants to accept. That's something that not a lot of customers are even aware of. And the fact that the US has been able to surcharge credit cards since January 27th of 2013. And so it's kind of been about time that Canada has had this option for businesses. Yeah. So let's move on to the next slide. So as Laura kind of mentioned, there's a lot of information out there, and we're offering you guys a lot of information as well. So not only have we created a consumer surcharging page, but we also share all these resources to you through a merchant page, which is what I'm calling it. But it's essentially a website that you can go and find all of this information, including questions that you likely have here that we'll try to post on there for the broader public to see. And then I might invite Corinne or Laura back to talk about our partners.
So Corinne, do you want to mention this one? And then we'll get on. There's a bunch of questions piling up, so I'm excited to get to those. But just before we leave the topic entirely, one of your other many hats that you wear is working on our savings partnerships. And just so everyone knows, the strength in numbers that we have with 95,000 business owners across Canada, we're able to negotiate good discounts, and as importantly, read the fine print of contracts so you don't have to. And Corinne and her team are very active in that space. So Corinne, I'll turn it over to you to talk about this one.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that you folks were aware that we do have a partnership with Chase. So if you're looking for a processor or you are looking to change a processor, it may be worth just giving them a call, because we've been able to negotiate fairly low rates, as Laura mentioned, as a result of our sort of bulk. I do want to notice that Amber, you asked a question about whether our acquirer Chase has told you, as when it comes to surcharging, that they're actually not going to be ready until the second quarter of 2023. And you've asked, why is that? Chase is no different than pretty much every other acquirer. We've heard that most of the acquirers are actually not quite ready. We were pretty disappointed to hear this ourselves, given that they've had at least a year knowing this was coming before that could happen. So we just want to acknowledge that. But in the meantime, you still need to have a process to do your rates. And if you are looking to make a change, we recommend you give Chase a call. It doesn't hurt to get a cost comparison if you're not using them already. So.
Yeah. And Corinne, you'll be happy to know that several people in the chat have been posting that they're happy with Chase. Of course, with any of the partners that we work with, they're big businesses. And so that's not always the case that everyone's uniformly happy. But one of the other advantages of going with this route is that we have people who can escalate concerns. So when we do have members who have concerns with Chase or any of the other partners that we have, we get actively involved in trying to resolve those concerns. So again, we're not pushing you to do this, but if you do want to, if this is useful, please do.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we've got a bunch of questions, and I'd like to get to some of those now. So Rachel and Marquesi, if you want to join us, or if you want to just stay in the background and answer questions, we can do it that way. But I think there are probably some that you've seen, Corinne, but one of the early ones was there are some on the paying credit card fees on PST, GST, and HST. Does that apply to the surcharging? Scott was just making a comment very early in the webinar saying how ridiculous, and I know you're lobbying on that, actively lobbying on that, but there were a bunch in that kind of space. So do you want to take that one on?
Well, I'll share this with Rachel, because to me, there's two questions here. One is this idea that, yeah, you've been paying basically credit card fees on the GST and HST for years now, and that's fundamentally unfair. It's something we've been raising constantly for many, many years to try to get rectified, because it seems crazy that you're doing that. Don't know if government's going to go there, but we keep reminding them that it's an unfair tax grab, and essentially the credit card companies benefit from it. So I think that's question one. We're still on that one. We're trying to push governments to lower fees overall, helping to sort of deal with that particular piece of it. But I think the second question has to do with the surcharging, and how does this GST, HST work with the surcharging? And I might turn that over to you, Rachel, to sort of get some clarification on that piece.
Yeah, so I mean, we've tried to ask the lawyers from the credit card class action on whether this applies, and they didn't feel really comfortable giving us an answer. So we put it to CRA, so we're still waiting on that. But what we have seen is big companies like TELUS who actually charge it on top of that. So their other big businesses are making sure it's before taxes.
Yeah, so that one is a question pending. We're hoping to get more clarification from CRA, but that is, I think, a really important question. And as soon as we feel solid in the answer that we can provide, we will post it to our website. We want to make sure it's CRA sanctioned before we put out exactly what the procedure would be in terms of GST, HST, and surcharging.
So if your processor isn't ready yet, you just have to wait? Are you just stuck and you just have to wait?
Well,
yeah. I can take this one. Great.
Well, my understanding, because Chase is a partner of ours, we kind of gave them a piece of our mind when we found out that this was not going to be ready. And that's one of the advantages of us also having a partnership with them, is that we can be a bit more explicit with them on why. They have said that they're going to have a workaround, and they have been able to get approvals from Visa and MasterCard. So if you have your own cash register, you can basically program your cash registers to add the surcharge now. And that's enough to deal with what it is that Visa and MasterCard require you to have in terms of disclosure to your customers around this. So it just won't appear on that receipt you get through the credit card machine. But if it appears on the receipt you get from your cash register, you can start to do it as long as you've registered with MasterCard along the lines of everything Rachel asked you to do in advance.
Okay, so let me back this up and really break it down and make sure everyone's clear on this. So if you want to go ahead and your processor isn't ready and you have a cash register that can show it on one of the receipts, basically the receipt from the cash register.
Correct.
You're okay to do that, but you still have to, I'm assuming, alert your processor and the credit card company that you are going to go ahead and do this.
Correct.
Okay. So, okay, hopefully that's clear for everyone. There's a bunch of questions along these lines. So Ellie is asking, can a company in Ontario that has a credit card sale to another company in Quebec, can we add a credit card surcharge to these orders? So Kathleen has a similar question. So those two questions.
My understanding is because you're selling to another business in Quebec, you should be fine to surcharge, because the ban on surcharging in Quebec has to do with Quebec consumers, not with Quebec businesses. So if it's selling to another business in Quebec, that's fine, not a problem. You can certainly charge a surcharge, again, as long as you've been disclosed it to your customer and that you've gone through the process of letting Visa and MasterCard know, or your processor know and MasterCard know that you're going to be doing that.
And I think this might be a quick one, but Ken is asking, does it include PayPal?
Not at this point, as far as I know, unless others have said otherwise. I did notice that there were some questions around American Express as well. Mm-hmm. And I said, somebody's here said that, who was it here in the chat? Flossie, I think a rep at Amex told her yesterday that we are also allowed to charge the surcharge for Amex transactions. And it can't be higher than what we're charging for Visa and MasterCard. So on that front, we'd have to confirm about the Amex side of the equation. I don't think you can do it on PayPal. I wasn't aware that you could do it on Amex because the surcharging Visa is only in Visa and MasterCard because they were the ones involved in this credit card class action settlement. Amex was not. This is not like a government thing. This is actually a industry thing. But what we'll have to do is confirm that with Amex and make sure that that is the case, what Flossie's saying. But that's great intel, and thank you for sharing that, if that is the case with Amex. Jocelyn, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I see a lot of questions come up about the difference between surcharging and convenience fee. Can you explain the difference between the two, please?
Rachel, that's yours.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Surcharging is more about the decision to use a credit card when you're paying. A convenience fee is more like a fee that a business is deciding to implement for maybe a cleaning fee, for example. That could be considered a convenience fee, and that applies to every single transaction, no matter the way that it has been decided to pay for it. Hopefully that answers the question.
And Matthew wanted to know, like, why don't we just call it all convenience fees? But I think you have to talk to your acquirer because it's going to be based on your contract, correct?
Yeah, and again, it kind of pointing to the fact that all of this stem from this credit card class action lawsuit against Visa and MasterCard. When we talk about this agreement, it's really the agreement that you have with Visa and MasterCard that's changing and allowing you now to surcharge when a person decides to pay with a Visa or MasterCard. Yeah, I know a lot of businesses have been asking, can I surcharge on purchases that are over $100? And that's just not really the way that this is supposed to be drawn up, right? It's really the choice to pay by credit card and the way that impacts your business costs.
So I'm going to get to another question here, and it's a little bit Anna's question, which has been upvoted by 4 people, and it's a little bit gets into the complexity of this. And this reminds me a lot, Corinne, of when we were in the early days of COVID and the programs had just been announced and they were changing, and we were sort of waiting to see how things were going to unfold. Like we really are at the beginning of this. And I just want everyone to know that if there are questions we can't answer, still super valuable, we will take them and we will update our FAQs. We will work to get you the answers. Corinne, the question from Anna is, when I contacted QuickBooks to notify my acquirer, and the acquirer is Intuit Merchant Canada, underwritten by Chase, I was told that I would be in violation of the merchant contract if I began surcharging. I will need to wait until the agreement is revised to allow surcharges. I think this relates back to the question that I asked a minute ago, which is, if your acquirer is not ready, can you still go ahead? But she's saying there's no due date for when the agreement will be amended. And so she wants to know, can she be fined with the, and then I'm not sure exactly how this relates, but maybe you can figure this out. Would the class action settlement override existing agreements? Is there anything to do to speed up the contract amendment?
It's an interesting question. I saw that too, Anna. And my understanding is the reason you register with MasterCard and your processor is so that they are basically overriding your agreement in that regard, right? So that is my understanding of what would happen as a result of that registration process and all the rest of it. So it's interesting that that's what they're telling you. And given that Chase is the underwriter of the Intuit Merchant Solutions, and Chase themselves are saying that you can do it by going through your cash register, even if they can't do it yet, as long as you've registered and done what you're supposed to do. That seems a bit odd to me. So That may be one that we'd have to dig into a bit further to try to understand why Intuit is giving you that information. So perhaps, Anna, a good thing to do would be to call our business resources colleagues who can maybe do some digging. We can ask Chase about it, or even Intuit, who we do have a bit of a relationship with as well, about why this is their question, or even go to Visa and MasterCard and ask them that directly if we need to.
Yeah, and the reason that I was saying this reminds me of COVID is like sometimes there's like conflicting information, and information even from what you would think would be credible sources that's not correct. And so this doesn't sound like it's right, I think is what you're saying, Corinne, but we would be happy to help you investigate that further to give you a little more confidence, because it's always a little bit, when you hear one thing from one person and another thing from another, that doesn't give you confidence in what you're doing. So
and I was going to say that, remember, this is an industry-led sort of initiative. So I think we're still learning as we're going a little bit. And not everybody, I think, is clear on what the rules exactly are. We're following the rules of Visa and MasterCard because those are the rules that they're the ones that actually have made this legal or made this allowable under the contract. So we'll have to go back to them and make sure that they're aware that there are maybe companies saying this to them, so that they can make sure to go to them and say, no, that's not true. So that's another way for us to learn about how to fix some of these anomalies that are happening.
Yeah, a bit of growing pains here for sure. And as this starts to land, and for those business owners who are a little more cautious about this, I think there are a number that we're hearing from that are saying we're interested in this, but we're not going to be the earliest adopter. Like, we're going to kind of wait and see where the dust settles. So Christy is asking, how do you get paid for the surcharges? If you accept the credit card payment on the full bill amount, including the surcharge, then aren't the credit card companies going to charge their fee on your surcharge fee? So,
yes, the answer is yes. But Rachel, you go ahead.
Yeah, it is an issue that we've heard about as well. And I know someone mentioned Moneris isn't ready, but we're hearing through the backgrounds that they also wanted to add a fee for this. That's really something that you'll have to keep us aware of, what's going on in your situation, and that's something that we can take back and talk to our partners, or Moneris, I'm pointing them out clearly about.
Okay, here's another one. Are Visa gift cards also considered as credit cards and subject to surcharges? That's from Ka Fei.
Yeah, that one I don't think so, but Rachel, do you know the answer to that one? I don't think they're considered credit cards.
I think they're more like cash, aren't they?
But I'm not sure if they're included in this.
I'm not sure either, so we can definitely.
That's another one we'll have to. That's a great FAQ for us to add in the future. So we'll take that one back and try to see if we can get a clear answer. My sense is they won't allow it, but who knows? But don't take my word for it.
And Rachel, I'm looking at you. Do you have any that you want to put in the, I'm trying to look at the ones that were upvoted, but.
Yeah, there's lots of questions. I was even going to add to that last question. Do they charge interchange fees the same way on those Visa cards, or those cash credit cards? So maybe that's a question that you can figure out on your end before we check it out. Yeah, there are a lot of questions. I just lost the one that I was looking at, unfortunately.
Well, I'll jump in and say there's been some questions around debit cards too. That's come up a little bit. I'll just clarify. So Interact Debit has always allowed surcharging. That's never been an issue for them. Hence, you'll probably have seen in the past some businesses, because they charge a flat fee, sometimes add a surcharge for lower sort of transactions than higher transactions. So this doesn't affect them. You can still either surcharge on debit. That's nothing new. It's allowed. You just have to disclose it to your customer. So that's nothing new there. That was one piece that I wanted to raise. There's also an interesting question here from Maria asking, do we know if there are a lot of businesses in the US that are surcharging since 2013? According to MasterCard, who obviously is very active in the United States as well, they have the same process in the US where they register with them. They say it hasn't been a huge amount in the US and I mean, if you go into the United States, it's not often that you've seen it, but it is available to them. And there's still probably a proportion of smaller businesses and larger businesses that potentially do that. So don't know the exact number, but it's not been a high amount to this point. I do want to mention too that all of this information is for you to take and to think about. You know, we're not encouraging you to do it. We're not discouraging you from doing it. We're just hoping that we can give you the information as much as we know of what the options are and what you need to do if you decide to do that. So, you know, and you do have to think a little bit about the impact of your customers and how they're going to react. You know, we've certainly seen some who already started to do that, getting some fairly big pushback on it. It could be one of those things that we'll have to wait and see as time goes on. A lot of business owners, as you saw in the survey that we did, we'll do it if the competitors do it. So I think that there's a bit of that going on. So, and I think all that is fair game, right? I mean, you have to make the best decision for your business. So, and
one of the other things I wanted to say, Corinne, as you're talking about that, is we had a tool that was popular a number of years ago that we're talking about revising, and it was really just a tool saying, hey, we pay more when you pay by credit card. Would you consider paying by debit or cash? And I know this actually came from a business owner. We saw a great sign in a restaurant. They were doing this, and they told us they were saving thousands of dollars every month off of their credit card fees just by kind of asking consumers, would you consider doing this to help my business? And we had some great signage around that. If that would be helpful, I'd love it if you would put that in the chat, because it's sort of a halfway. It's not a surcharge, but it's saying to customers, hey, we do pay more when you use your credit card, and we love it if you would choose this other option. We know we've heard from business owners that some of that have saved them lots of money. And I think with this being a little bit more in the news and some businesses doing it, like, consumers will have a little more awareness about these fees than they have in the past. So if that's helpful, we would be happy to kind of revise some of that. I know I still see some of these signs around, and it'd be helpful for us to hear that would be helpful.
Yeah,
just to jump on to that, Laura, we've also heard from some of our members that they're offering discounts for using cash or Interac, right? Definitely an option. If you're paying 4% for processing, you can just, you know, give a 3% discount or something for using cash. I know a few contractors who do this, and it works out pretty well. And you had that conversation about it being more cost effective for everyone at the end of the day.
And that's actually always been allowed. So you don't need to register. You don't need to do anything. If you prefer to just provide a discount for cash, that you can do today without having to register for credit cards.
I mean, I kind of like it as a halfway, if you're not quite ready to surcharge, but you'd like to see some savings from fewer of your customers using credit cards. I think it's a nice kind of midway option, especially since there are a lot of comments about, wow, this seems a little more like, this feels like it should be simpler than it is. And it feels like a lot of keys to turn to make this work. Like, a lot of people, you've got alert, and then how you do it. And then of course there's the fear of, well, what happens if you do it wrong? I did notice there are a lot of questions. Some of them ended up in the chat, but about that maximum rate of 2.4%. And I think some people were saying that it was suggesting that it was higher than that. Other people were suggesting that some of the credit card surcharge, some of the fees that the credit cards charge are higher than that. So, and other people saying it might be difficult to know what they are. So there were a bunch of questions piled into that category. Do you want to make any comments around that?
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be a bit of a challenge, is figuring out. And it is one of the things you really have to think about if you're planning to go down this path, is what is it I'm going to charge, right? It could be an average of what it is that you pay for all your credit cards. And if that is under 2.4%, then you can just make that the fee that you charge everybody, right? You can change it. So when we say it can be charged by product or by brand, that means, and I did see a question on this, that means you can charge it by all Visa card transactions get say a 2% fee on them, and all MasterCard get this. That's the product level, or the brand level. I should say that's the brand level. The product level is that you only choose to apply the fee on cards that you know have a higher fee for your business, right? So you know that they're a premium card, or they're a corporate card, or they're paying through an online transaction, which always tends to be higher. Those ones are brand level. So you can also just apply it to those types of transactions and not to just the regular credit card transactions, and just choose a fee for that, right? As long as it's less than 2.4% and reflects relatively well what you pay, you should be on safe ground when it comes to that charge. Because I think it gets too complicated if you're going to do multiple charges based on cards. I think it's just easier, if you're going to go down this path, to maybe come up with an average amount that you would normally pay. And then charge that back to the customer, saying that's the average fee I pay for my credit cards that I accept at this business.
Yeah, and we're getting to that unfortunate part in the webinar where time is getting short. But I think Mark's question is, or comment is a really good one to end on, Corinne, because he's saying, to me, the best way moving forward would be for CFIB to continue to pressure the credit card companies to lower their percentage charge for their cards. This will help small business without having to get into surcharging. And I think that is, Mark, I'm going to let Corinne, because she's the real expert here, but that really has been CFIB's push. And in fact, it was our members who alerted us. It was well over a decade ago when these premium cards started coming into the market, and the bills weren't transparent. It was unclear what was going on. You were forced to do it, to accept the higher charges with no exit ramp off these contracts. So, you know, Corinne has been an amazing advocate on this file, and has been lobbied for credit code of conduct, along with our president, Dan Kelly, who is also very active in this space. So rest assured, Mark, we're going to keep lobbying, and Corinne can add a little bit more detail to that umbrella answer.
Yeah, well, you probably covered most of it there, Laura. So, but exactly right. I would say that is the most important thing. And that's still our number one priority, is to get fees lowered, because if fees were lower, surcharging wouldn't even be an option. I don't think anybody would want to disrupt their customers that way. But because fees are so high, you have to find other ways to recoup some of those costs, and surcharging is an option. So we're going to continue to work hard on getting those fees lowered, because that's the only way I think we can really address this in the simplest way possible.
Yeah, like a lot of policy problems, surcharging isn't the magic bullet at all, but I think it does put more pressure on Visa and MasterCard to be more reasonable with their rates. And it does help educate consumers that, hold on a minute, like there are fees on the other side of this. And so that's helpful. I'm going to sneak in one more question, and then we've got 2 more slides. So I'm going to ask you to answer it really quickly. There were a couple of questions on reporting and like what happens if we accidentally turn a profit, like how are we going to have to report? I think obviously whenever there's anything like this, auditing becomes like, oh, like could we be audited? Any information or advice or thoughts on that?
Probably too early to tell, but like I said, just make sure that when you choose the fee that you want to charge your customers, it is based on something. So maybe look at your monthly merchant statements and sort of take a look at what your average fees are per month, right? And sort of just choose a number that, if you should get audited in the future, though the likelihood is probably fairly small, and they're usually more complaints-based type things anyways, that you can easily prove, well, this is my average fee over the course of the last 6 months. So that's why I'm charging 2%, because that's what I pay on average, kind of thing.
We always say, like, keep like a little business diary or journal. This was some of our COVID advice too, but where you're taking notes when you're making these kinds of changes, and you can go anything you're afraid you might forget to remember in terms of your thinking and your logic and your recording to do that. Lots of thank yous. I've got a couple more slides I'm going to run through super fast to let you know what else is happening. We've got some more webinars here for members. For non-members, consider joining. It's a great organization. A lot of members will validate that for you, and you can visit our member portal we've got a link there to join CFIB. Again, great organization, reasonable fees. And if you'd like to have someone come out and talk to you a little bit more about what joining means, that's an option for you too. Member portal for upcoming webinars is there, but also we'll send you emails. And I think there's just one other upcoming thing we wanted to alert you to: cybersecurity. We did a webinar on this a while ago. We partnered with MasterCard for some really quick training that you can use, and you can also use with your employees. And that is launching launching soon. So we'll give you an update when that launches. And then let's see what, I think that may be it, other than just calling Corinne up and Rachel up for a 20-second goodbye to everybody. So Rachel, I'll turn it to you first.
Thanks. Yeah. Take a second, look at what the cost is to your business on these things, and based on that, set an expectation with your customers, right? Make sure you're educating them. This could also be a good opportunity for you to just say, we're not surcharging, and customers might love you for it and start coming to your business as well. So, or this could be a way to get some money back for all those costs that you've been taking on. It'll really be up to you, and we won't be able to tell you the amount that you should be doing or the decision that you should take. So it'll really be your business decision. So I wish you the best of luck in that.
Thanks. Corinne?
Yeah, just basically what Rachel said. This is an option that we wanted to make sure you were aware of, that you can take in your business. No obligation to do so, not mandatory at least, but could be helpful for some of you if you feel that these costs are just becoming too much. At the same time, educating your customers will be important, even if you choose not to surcharge, and what the costs are. And so I think we've had some pretty good feedback that may be something we should add to the mix as a sign that sort of discourages people from using credit cards if you decide you don't want to surcharge, but still want to make sure your customers are aware of the costs involved. But thanks for joining us. And you know where we are, where there's a phone number there. Please give us a call if we didn't get to your question today. So thanks.
And you guys should know lots of thank yous for the great information you put together. And I'll just add to Corinne, thank you for joining us. We're here if and when you need us. Feel free to give us a call. Check out our FAQs. We're going to use all the great questions from this webinar to update them. And as always, we love you guys. So take good care. You guys on Main Street are our heroes. And we love being in your corner. And just reach out if you need anything. And we'll hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thanks, everyone. With that, we'll end the webinar.